Okay, so let us get started. Again, today is about Portra Original for Capture One. If you have any friends that are Capture One users or you're curious about switching to Capture One, stick around. This is going to be really good and you'll see how it all works. So I'm going to go first through all the different films in the Portra pack to give you a sense of what they are, what they're good for. And then we'll dive into the three-step workflow and I will edit a bunch of photos for you and I will take questions as I go. So don't be shy. Please ask questions and either Casey or Kyle will flag me down and we'll get them answered. So, all right. So for our first film, we've got Portra 160. This Kodak film is amazing. It's very low saturation, medium contrast. It's very subtle and neutral. This is the film that, to me, kind of I identify with a lot of the kind of hipster photography that was happening, like in Portland and the Pacific Northwest, like in the mid 2000s or late 2000s. It's got that really nice kind of delicate brown overall look. But we believe in green, so there's still some green in it. And that's just how the film is. It's a really nice film. It's great on almost everything because it's so subtle. Next up, we've got Portra 400. This is the OG of films for me. It's the one that I shot the most of. It's an exceptional film. It makes pale skin look really warm and healthy. It's got nice medium contrast, nice saturation. It's just a really nice all-around film that you can use anywhere. It doesn't overwhelm the image. It doesn't take over the image and change it too much. It just enhances it. So it's a really nice film. And then we have Portra 800, which has a little more saturation, higher contrast than Portra 400, and it has more of a red undertone than Portra 400, which tends to go more towards yellow. So those are kind of the big differences. And yeah, so there you go. Those are the differences. I will show them on different photos in a second. And we're going to be using the Mastin Labs three-step workflow for the entire edit. And all of our edits are this way. It's really simple. You just apply the preset or style onto your photo. And this transforms it into the right color palette and adds micro contrast and gives it the film qualities that it's emulating. This includes how it reacts to light in low light or high light or bright light. In any kind of light, it will react the same way as film. Second, you're going to need to probably adjust the exposure. Unless you nail it perfectly in camera, you're probably going to have to usually bring up the exposure, because most cameras tend to protect highlights above all else and intentionally give you a slightly underexposed image. But no big deal, no problem. That's easy. And then the last thing that you're going to need to do in half of the cases, or half of the time that you're editing, is you're going to need to adjust white balance and tint. And there is no camera on the market that's going to nail white balance and tint every single time. Not until we have some kind of massively powerful AI, exposure system built into cameras. No camera can know what kind of light you're shooting in, whether you're shooting in sunset, whether you're shooting against a bright green background or bright red background, which is going to change the color balance. So you need to do this yourself in Lightroom or Capture One, and it's easy. And that's the whole system. Preset, exposure, white balance, tint. That's all you got to do. Don't need to touch anything else. So, let's get started. All of these are community images. I love that our community is so passionate and so active. Again, if you're not a member, please join us. It doesn't matter if you own anything or not. It's just a great place. So this is by Laura Gardner. And I'm going to actually show you all three styles on this image so you can kind of see the differences yourself. So like I said, you start with the style. So I'm going to do Portra 160. And that does a lot of changes all at once, as you can see. But after that, you're just going to increase the exposure if you need to. If you wanted to keep it dark and moody, you could just leave it, like here. I mean, this is essentially like a one-click edit. I think this image looks great just how it is, but I'm going to edit it just a little bit further. So I would increase the exposure just a little bit. The temperature, the Kelvin, value looks pretty good. I don't think I would, maybe I'd warm it up just a tiny bit. And the tint looks pretty good. When I'm adjusting tint, so this is the magenta green balance, and I believe this is where good skin tone comes from. I look at a few things to determine if it's in the right area. And usually I look for something neutral in the photo. So in this photo, I'm looking at this tree trunk in the background, like way off in the corner over here. And to me, it looks like it's already pretty neutral. So I kind of check that, then I go over to her face and I look at the highlights. Those look pretty neutral, and her skin tone looks pretty neutral. If anything, maybe it's a tiny bit magenta, but I mean, I can test that just by going a little bit towards green, but it looks pretty good to me. So, I can go a little bit green. Yeah. So I went just a few points green, hardly anything. I mean, for those watching at home, the difference between adjusting it and not is very slight. But that's it. That's the edit. From there, you can add one of the tone profiles. So if you're not familiar with what a tone profile is, it's something from the Fuji Frontier scanner that we use to make these emulations that lets you dial in the shadows or highlights independently without changing the whole image. So it's all about subtlety. So in this case, I want to bring out a little bit of detail in this chair. So I can just hit shadow soft. And when it says shadow soft, that just means bring in detail in the shadows and bring in, whoops, I hit shadow hard. And it brings in just a subtle amount of detail in the chair. Again, this may be hard to see at home because you're watching a feed, but what it does is it brings out a little bit of shadow detail here at the bottom of the chair. And now I can see like every individual, like stick in the back of the chair that makes up the chair. And I wasn't able to see that very well before. Tone profiles are really, really helpful for that last little finishing touch, but they're not required. And that's why they're not in the 3-step workflow. They're kind of like a bonus thing. So that is your basic, 3-step edit. This is before. Oh, hold on one second. Yes. That's what happens when you hit Z instead of, you hit A instead of Z, which is just super funny and awesome. Oh, come on. Why am I not able to select this? All right. It's not. Oh, I have everything selected. All right. Yes. The other side effect of hitting Control A is that, which is really, really sweet. Oh, great. And now it went back. All right. Let me just do that edit over again because I don't have my undo state anymore. Okay. 160. Shadow soft. I brought up the exposure just a little bit. And I moved the tint slider towards green. I guess the bonus for everyone watching is you get to see a speed edit. So, okay. So here's before. And there is after with 160. So a big difference, it still looks very natural from before and after, but you're getting that really nice micro contrast that film has, and the color palette is shifting to look like 160. It's really good. All right, so Portra 400. So if I go to Portra 400, you can see that right away there is more saturation across the entire image. Now the greens are really popping. Her skin tone has gone a little bit more yellow rather than red. Or Portra 160 is more brown than red. So it went from kind of a brown to more of a yellow tone. This is what I'm talking about with nice golden skin tones. That's where that comes from. If you want to back that off a little bit, you can just bring Kelvin down a little bit cooler. But again, it's still a really nice look. Very versatile. Like Portra 160 to 400 is totally different, and they're both really nice. It depends on what you want. And then Portra 800, you can see the red come back into the image a little more contrast, and yet the colors are still really popping. So between all three, between Portra 160, Portra 400, and Portra 800, you have a tool for almost every situation. You'll see in more of the other images that I edit. So let's go to this image. This is by Paige Grib, and I'm going to go through all three again for you and show you the three-step edit again in Capture One. So this image, although it's hard to tell, there is quite a bit of contrast. She's against a white blown out sky. It's still pretty dark, like where she is. She's in the shade in comparison to the background. So I'm probably going to have to increase the exposure no matter what I choose, but we'll see. So here is Portra 160. And then the second step would be to increase the exposure. The nice thing about all of the styles we make is they do have film modeling in them. So they react to light in the same way that film does. The way that film reacts to light is that it really protects highlights as the exposure increases. So it's very hard to blow out a photo, meaning go to pure white. So I can increase the exposure after using any of these styles pretty high and not lose detail in the highlights. This image already doesn't have any detail in the highlights per se. I mean, very much. We can look here. Yeah, so it was blown out even before I started. But it does protect it all around her arm and everywhere else. And it really has really nice fall off around her face. So I applied Portra 160, increased the exposure. I'm going to warm this up just, I don't know, just a tiny bit. And that looks great. It's a really nice image that Paige sent in. I really appreciate it. So this is, whoops, here is before, and there is after with 160. It looks so good. It looks like an editorial image for like Urban Outfitters or something. Like it's just really nice and clean, great composition. I love her hand on her face and her expression. I love that she has a reflection in the wall here. The only thing I would remove are these two little blue antennae sticking out of her head. But that's easy. That's super easy. You could just clone it right out and it would be gone. But it's a really nice image. So that is Portra 160. I'm going to reset and just do an edit with Portra 400. So I applied Portra 400. Increase the exposure. We've got a little more saturation this time, a little more contrast. Her skin tone is warmer. It still looks really, really good. I don't think I need to make any adjustments to Kelvin or tint. She looks great. So let me do one more here. Now we're going to do Portra 800. And again, I'm going to bring up the exposure. Her skin is a little more red compared to Portra 400. So if I hover over Portra 400, I can flip-flop and show you. So that's Portra 400 with more of a yellow, golden, warm bias. And then 800, which is, it's funny, it's almost kind of like Superior 400 from the Fuji Everyday pack that we released not too long ago. It's just toned down in a very Portra way. Portra, the reason it's called Portra, these films are called Portra, is that they were intended for portraits. So it sounds obvious like when you say it, but they're really good portrait films. Whereas like something like Ektar in the Adventure Everyday pack, that was never intended for portraits. That was for emulating slide film almost. So very, very bright and vivid and saturated, like good for landscapes. Although people did make it work for skin tone. You just have to be a little more careful with it. All right, so anyway, thank you, Paige. It's a really nice image. Thanks for sending it in. All right, let's get something different here. I like this one. So Diana Gillis sent this in. It's fairly underexposed. However, with modern cameras, that doesn't seem to really matter these days, and we should get a really nice edit anyway from it. So I think it's a cool photo, and you'll see how nice it looks edited. So for this image, so this brings me back to my own wedding career. I would have used Portra 400, and I was shooting film at the time. I was a hybrid photographer, one of the very first. I shot digital and film together at everything. But Portra 400 is what I would have used. So I applied that. I'm going to bring up the exposure. And then looking at her skin tone, I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more. Looking at her skin tone and at the ground behind her, like over here on the side where that bark is, I can see immediately that the image is a little bit magenta and a little bit cool. So I'm going to increase the Kelvin/temperature slider, warm it up just a little bit. And I'm going to, well, now that I warmed it up, yeah, maybe a little bit of green. So I'm going to slide it just a tiny bit towards green. And I'll go up a little more in exposure. This is a perfect image candidate for all soft. So remember those tone profiles I was talking about that either affect highlights or shadows without making the whole image change too much? In this case, if I was shooting this on film and scanning it, or doing it in Capture One as I am now, I would use either all soft or highlight soft to bring back the highlights in the grass and on her dress. Let me show you what that looks like. So if I hit highlight soft, you can see, if I just kind of roll over it back and forth, you can see that the highlights are being knocked down to being, so that there's now detail there, but they're still nice and crisp and white. In fact, I'll zoom in, whoops, maybe not that far. Let's zoom into like a reasonable amount. All right, so there's highlight soft as I roll over it. And you can see the dress detail comes back. There's detail in the grass. It's perfect. I mean, it is like the reason that these tone profiles exist, I believe, was for photos like this that real working photographers were doing. And they were being scanned on the Fuji Frontier when people only shot film. So I would use either highlight soft or all soft. So what's nice about all soft is that it also brings back shadow detail. So this image is very, just by its very nature, is very contrasty. And not that it matters too much, but this like part of this tree up here is like almost totally black. But when you use all soft, it brings out a little bit of detail in the tree, brings back detail in the dress and the grass, and yet the image still looks natural and not like crazy HDR looking. If HDR is your thing, that's awesome, but it doesn't look like film, and I'm concerned with things looking like real film because that's timeless, and it's easy, and it makes your work look really, really good, and you deserve that. You put all this time and energy into making beautiful photos for people. That last finishing touch is to make it look clean and consistent, and film is where it's at. Real film is where it's at. That's timeless. And that is the look that we try to give you. We try to give everybody. So let me show you just a quick before and after, and then I think I have a question. So here is before, and there is after. Beautiful photo. It's like turning on a light switch. It's so good. Okay, question.
Yeah, from Edward Hubert. How do you suggest we shoot white balance in camera with auto white balance, or like a Kelvin, or using the presets?
Okay, so Edward asks, how should we get white balance correct overall in camera, however? So white balance is one of the trickiest parts of editing, of post-processing. And my best piece of advice that I can give you is to train your eye to see color casts. There is no magic bullet. I've used Expo discs. I've used Passport color checkers, both of which are a pain in the ass when you're like actually working. You know, to have the Expo disc on, shoot, and then start shooting your scene, and then remembering to put it back on every time the light changes. My best advice is to just shoot auto white balance or daylight if you're in daylight. And that's just going to get you in the ballpark for when you edit in Capture One. That's my best piece of advice. And then you're just training your eye to see, like, is the image too warm or too cool? That's usually easier for people to see. Most people can get that pretty fast. The harder one is seeing tint. And that is what separates the post-processing beginner with the pro, is that you learn to look for tint problems. And that's why I look for something neutral in the photo. Something that I know is like gray or black, not black. Black doesn't work. It's got to have some light on it. But something that should be gray, like concrete or asphalt or a suit should be pretty much gray. That's where you're going to see a tint issue. And that's how I correct tint. So you'll see it right away. You'll see like it's really like magenta or purple looking. That means you need to add more green with the tint slider. Not anywhere else. Don't touch HSL. Don't touch curves. It's just the tint slider. And that's how you're going to get good skin tones. So if I go back a few steps on this photo even, I'll show you where I found the problem. Okay, so I applied the preset and increased the exposure, right? So this is for Edward. So my eyes immediately went to, and there's no asphalt or concrete in this photo, but my eyes went to this landscaping back here. Jeez, why does it go right to 100? Okay, so right here, whoops, right behind the bride. I looked right there, and I looked right here in this shadow. And that is where, and actually part of this house up here, see back here? That's where I'm looking for my neutrals. And that's where I'm going to see that tint issue. So I'll edit the photo from this zoomed in so you can see what I mean. So without really looking at her skin tone too much, although you can if you want, I'm just going to increase the temperature. It's actually harder zoomed in, to be frank. There we go. So I'm actually looking off to the side here at this landscaping to see when that looks right. All right. So I've got the warmth right. So this little shady part looks right, and her skin looks right, let's be honest. There is still a little bit of magenta in this little patch back here. And a little bit in the grass down here. And I can even see it in this flower, whatever kind of flower that is. So all I need to do is just slide the tint slider towards green, just, I mean, like ever so slightly. If you do it too much, it just makes it look crazy. But like negative 1.4 looks about right. So now when I zoom back out, I can actually increase the exposure again because I'm going to use all soft. Now it looks great. Looks perfect. That's how I do it. If I see any more photos where I can show you how to really dial in tint, I will help you, Edward. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, let's move on. Okay, I can show you tint on this photo because he's wearing a suit. So this is by Eric Rudd, a friend of mine from a long time ago. In fact, he just got in touch with me by, I think, our support system, and I will write you back as soon as possible, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Eric. He's one of the original people that I was in the film shooters group with on Facebook, an amazing guy, and I'm really happy he sent some images in. So let's edit this with all three. So I'm going to start with Portra 160. And I'm going to increase the exposure. And now the image, she looks fairly pale, so I'm going to increase the temperature a little bit. And the image has quite a big contrast range between the background and the foreground. Like there's bright sky up here and then his dark suit. So to balance all that out, I'm going to use all soft. And then the last part, as promised, is I'm going to do one tiny adjustment to tint based on his suit. So his suit is a little bit magenta. It looks a little bit purple. So to get rid of that, I'm going to just slide the tint slider towards, I mean like there. I mean, that was just the smallest amount, but that's what kind of dialed in. Yeah, that's what dialed in the skin tone for me. That's it. That's the magic trick. Might actually go up in exposure just a tiny bit more. Yeah, that looks great. All right, so let me show you before and after, and then I'll do Portra 400. So there's before, and there is after. So here is Portra 400. You can see the saturation has increased quite a bit. 160 is the least saturated of the three. So now we're kind of amping it up a little bit. There was more yellow in Portra 400 in general. So you saw his skin tone get like maybe a little bit too golden. You can back that off by just bringing the temperature down a tiny bit and actually back towards just a little bit towards magenta. I'm actually going to bring the exposure down a little bit. And then the very last is Portra 800. And then his skin is going to go red again because we are kind of navigating in this triangle of Portra 160, Portra 400, and Portra 800. And anytime you move between all three of them, you're emphasizing either brown, yellow, or red. So you can really see that in his skin tone, like kind of bounce around between all of those. I think Portra 160 looks the best on this couple. So I'm going to go back to that. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much, Eric, for sending this in. It's really cool. All right, let me go to something completely different. We have this nighttime photo, long exposure. It's really cool. Is that like a country fair or something? Looks like a 8 seconds exposure. Awesome. ISO 50 at 8 seconds. That's the way you do a nighttime photo because there's like no noise, really cool light and great color and lots of color information. So this was definitely on a tripod and it's really cool. Portra is not something I would normally use on a nighttime image, but I'm sure it will look great. What I would normally use on an image like this would probably be either Superia 400 from the Fuji Everyday Pack or Ektar from, yeah, Casey's like, yeah, or Ektar from the Adventure Everyday Pack. So Superia 400 or Ektar. That's what I would go to immediately, but I'm sure it'll look nice with probably like Portra 400. So I'm going to apply Portra 400. Awesome. Yeah, it looks nice and rich. Easy peasy. I love the change here where it says zipper before and after. It's just got a lot, it's just perfect. It's got a lot of contrast in a good way and really nice rich color. I'm going to increase the exposure just a little bit. And I don't really know what else I would do. Maybe warm it up just a tiny bit. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, that looks great. I love it. That looks really cool. So let's see, would there be any benefit to using a tone profile? Let's just try. So here's all hard. And it's already contrasty and dark, so it doesn't need that. And there's all soft. All soft is kind of nice because it brings out the detail in the crowd below the zipper spinny thing. So I'm going to go to all soft. And here is before. And there is after. Oh, that looks fantastic. Looks really good. I love nighttime images like that. I love like neon, different colored lights. You can have a lot of fun with that. So thank you so much, Laura, for sending that in. It looks really good. All right, so we've got an image here from Pascal Googler. Really nice image. It looks European to me, which is awesome. And let's do a few edits. So let's start with Portra 160. There's Portra 160. Going to increase the exposure a little bit. Bring out the difference between his jacket and the background. It's a high overcast day. If I go back to before anything, you can even see it here where, oh, man, that 100% zoom. Um, her eye sockets are dark and her cheekbones are kind of lit up, and like the top of her eyebrow there, and the same on this guy, like his nose is lit up, the top of his head, under his cheekbones, or on top of his cheekbones, and it's dark eye sockets in here. So even though the light looks really diffused, it's still harsh in a way. It's coming probably from directly overhead through clouds, and that's going to make it have a lot of contrast. It's hard to see in a raw image, but it's there. So we're going to work with that. Again, tone profiles to the rescue. So this is Portra 160. I increase the exposure. And now I'm going to just warm it up a little bit. My eyes are cruising around, seeing if it's too green or too magenta. It doesn't look either. It looks just right. And the last thing I'm going to do is do all soft. And what that is going to do is just kind of mellow out that contrast, like bring it all together and make it look really good. So there is the after, and there is before. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Pascal. Really nice image. Okay, let's see here. We've got this is a really cool family image. I love it. Yeah, they look so happy. And they have a dog. Okay, cool. Let's do this. First of all, and this is by Laura Gardner also, I am going to attempt to make this a little more straight, just because I like my images to be a little bit straighter. That looks good. You know, maybe I could, that house now looks a little bit crooked. And, okay. Oh, okay. I see. That looks good. All right. Woo. All right. Great image. Let's see how it looks. I feel like this image is a Portra 800 image. It's got a lot of energy. I think it'll look great with that extra color, extra contrast. So let's just start there. There's Portra 800. Now I'm going to do all soft. And I think I'm going to increase the exposure just a tiny bit. Actually, let me see. I'm going to go down. I'm kind of looking at the highlights on his head and on her face, and I'm adjusting for that. So I actually went down in exposure. That looks great. Now, looking for white balance. It's a little bit warm. I might cool it down just a tiny bit. I mean, I barely touched it. And now I'm looking for neutrals. So some of the neutrals I'm looking at her like yoga pants, or these black pants. They're lit up enough that I can kind of see a color cast in there. And I'm looking at the top of the house, these tiles. Looking at the side of this bench. And even these little trees back here, and these trees. They all look pretty good. I would say maybe they're a tiny bit magenta, so I'm going to drop the tint just a tiny bit. Yeah, great. That was it. That was the key. Very small change, but it looks great. So here is after. Here is before. Easy. Super easy. Easy and consistent. And you'll never get tired of the look. Like, it's based on real film. It's timeless. It's the reason I started shooting film. Way back in the day. Back when newspapers were using... I was a photojournalist. We were using film and digital. It was the thing I loved about film. I'm not gonna be all hipster about film. I'm gonna be very real about it. The reason I loved film was that I could find a look that was consistent, that I knew that I would never get tired of. And that's really important. I followed trends for a while when I was younger, when I was kind of first starting out, and I really regretted it because those trends come and go pretty fast, and then all the work you've done is kind of throwaway. Or that, or you have to re-edit it. Film never changes. Film is beautiful. It's timeless. And that is like the reason that we even have Mastin Labs, is that I want to give that to you for your digital work so you don't get tired of it. Oh yeah, question.
Yeah, this is from Isaac. He asks, when you're doing client work, would you recommend sticking with one preset, or can he get away with using like a whole pack?
Ah, okay. Who asked again?
Isaac.
Isaac. Okay, so Isaac asked, when doing client work, is it good to stick with like one style or preset, or mix it up and use like say everything from a pack, for consistency's sake? That's a difficult question. I would say, at least in my experience of photography and studying different people, that the more that you can decide on your tools and on your look, and then focus just on the content or what you're trying to say, the more successful you'll be and the more memorable you'll be. So if you're constantly jumping around from like different focal lengths, different ways of shooting, off-camera flash, not off-camera flash, natural light, jumping from film to film, 1 month you're a black and white shooter, 1 month you're color, whatever, you're never going to build that consistency that is what makes you known. You're not known by like, you may win an award or something for like a photo, but to be known like for a style, that comes from making decisions and sticking to them. So try a lot of different film styles, try a lot of different real films. I pray that you shoot real film because it's amazing. I can't explain it more than that. Just do it. Try all those things, experiment, find what you connect with, like on an emotional level. Not what you think others think you should be doing, but what you want to do. Stick with it and build your work around it. Commit to it, and you will have more success. So in that case, I would say try everything, buy all the packs, of course. No, I'm kidding. Or no, I'm kind of kidding, not kidding. Most people find they need all of them anyway. But find what works for you for different types of clients and situations, and stick with it and build that consistency, because that will take you really far. That's my opinion. So I'll give you a real world example from my own career. All of my street portrait photography is Portra 800. All of it. Why? Because I just found it just gave the right vibe, the right connection with the subject for that series. All of my wedding work in the Pacific Northwest, so I did 20 years of wedding photography, all of my work in the Pacific Northwest was Portra 400, without exception, because it worked really good in this environment. All of my clients are Caucasian. It's always cloudy and raining. There's never any light, and like Portra 400, the film, did it all for me. Then I started shooting a lot in Southern California and in San Francisco, etc. When I was in that light, I was a Fuji 400H shooter, because that is the film that looks best in that light. So that's what I mean by consistency. So hopefully that helps. All right. I'm going to do 2 more photos, and we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a good day, and we're going to celebrate with you Portra Original for Capture One. So, all right. So this is from Eric Rudd. So thank you again. One more photo. I just picked it out of my pile here because I love portraits, and let's see how it looks. All right, let's do Portra 160. This is a very pale person. I want to point that out. Pale red hair. This would be the type of person I would shoot in Seattle. So I am expecting Portra 400 to look really good for her. Portra 160 is not going to have enough saturation. That's just the nature of that film. But I'm going to start with it just so you can see. This is Portra 160. Going to increase the temperature, Kelvin. And I'm actually going to drop the exposure just a tiny bit. And I'm going to do highlight soft. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. All right, that is a very simple representation of Portra 160. It's got that kind of subtle brown color. It's not really saturated. It's very neutral. And there is your edit. It's great. She looks great. Here's before and here's after. Now, I would probably shoot her with Portra 400 because she is very pale, and Portra 400 was meant to make pale skin look warm and healthy. So Portra 400, or maybe 800 even, for that little extra better color. Let's do 800. Okay, so Portra 800. We're gonna add maximum color. She needs it. I mean, she doesn't need it, but I just, whatever. She looks great. Just, I want more warmth. So Portra 800, increase the temperature a little bit, and highlight soft. Now there you go. That is, and drop the exposure just a tiny bit. Perfect. That's exactly what I would do if it was my photo. This, or at least this is the vibe that I like in my work. So if you ever check out my street photography series on my Instagram, Kirk_Mastin, you'll see this is Portra 800. That's what I shoot for my street portraits. It looks the same. I like it. So great photo, Eric. Thanks for sending it in. It's really cool to see it in Capture One. It's a lot of fun. All right, let's do one last photo here. Let me see here. What's something different? Let's do, I like this one here. This is by Pascal Goug. I'm just going to say your name is Google because it just sounds fancier. Or Googler? I don't know. Anyway, you're a cool dude because every Pascal I've ever met was really cool. So you're in that club. This is different because it is a really nice kind of monochromatic photo to begin with. We've got a little bit of green from the plant, her skin tone on the floor, but otherwise it's, I don't know, it's very beautiful. It's very subtle. So let's see. I'm going to just guess right off the bat that Portra 160 is going to be the best for this one because I'm not looking for saturation in a photo like this. In fact, I would use like Fuji 400H on a photo like this because that film is all about luminous pastel soft color, and that's what this photo is kind of calling out for. The closest thing to that would be Portra 160 because it's the least saturated, most neutral. So I'm going to apply that, increase the exposure a bit. It can take it. I'm going to use all soft. Why? Because a lot of this is, at least the sky out here is pretty blown out, and the edge of her dress is a little bit blown out. But I want my midtones here. I want the middle tones to be about here for her skin. So to get this dress area back, we're going to do all soft. Let me see, all soft or shadow or highlight soft. No, I think all soft is perfect. Okay, now I'm going to kind of scan through the photo here and look for any kind of neutrals to see if like we're a little bit too magenta, too green. There's nothing really to look at. I mean, the floor maybe. My gut feeling is that it's a little bit, again, I don't know what it is about today. It's a little bit too magenta. So I'm going to go a little bit towards green on the tint slider, but just a tiny bit, like barely anything, because you're going to see that get picked up in the walls really quickly. And while I'm at it, I'm going to increase the temperature with the Kelvin slider. There we go. It's kind of wild, but we're getting a light and airy look from Portra 160. So there you have it. But it looks really good. All right. I'm going to reset it and show you before and after. So that is before and that is after. One thing I want you to notice through this entire edit before I wrap it up is that at no time did I ever go to the color correction panel or touch anything else. It's just exposure, just white balance, and tone profiles. You have all the tools you need. The key is to get those three factors dialed in. And in fact, I've been working in the custom Mastin Labs workspace that comes with our Capture One packs. This is part of your purchase. And we built this workspace to make Capture One as simple and easy to use as possible and put only the tools that you need in front of you. to make life super easy. So there you go. It's great. It's easy to install. Comes with every download. So check it out. Yeah, and man, these photos were amazing and awesome. I really appreciate everything that everyone sent in. Really, really good stuff. I think I love. I mean, I shouldn't pick a favorite. I think I like this one the most today. It's just got such a cool vibe. And I like this one too, except I would remove the blue smokestacks. But yeah, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this edit today, we have so many more of these shows, like 60 plus. You can just spend all day like a total photo nerd like me, watching people edit and learning and just hearing me BS about stuff. So check it out on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and like everything you see there. Also, join our Facebook community. I can't tell you enough how nice it is to have people in there who are just so happy to help. If you want to see how Mastin Labs looks on your photos, just join our Facebook community, drop in a Dropbox link or a WeTransfer link to one of your raw photos. Let people know what you want it edited with, and either someone here at Mastin Labs or probably like 20 really excited people in the community will jump in and show you what's possible to make your photo look the best it can be. So definitely join that community. And also, yeah, I'm just stoked that we have all this great stuff coming out for Capture One. More is on the way. Stay tuned and join me next time for our next live edit session. Happy editing.